Thank you, Nick. Good morning. Welcome in, everybody. It's so good to see everybody again. It's been some time since we've all been together. What better way to get the juices flowing than a little Bon Jovi, Life is Limitless, to get us excited and motivated today. We have a hot topic today for sure. The band, it was time to get the band back together. We were doing, for those of you who remembered, we were doing weekly town halls in the heart of COVID from the moment it started. The group that we put together that we have back with you today gave so much of their time during COVID to make sure that we kept our clients, anybody who wanted to be informed about what was happening during COVID. The group that we reassembled here today put a lot of time and effort into making sure that we were able to put together a weekly town hall every single week, coming to you with information. It was very hard to come by. None of us, a lot of us, never lived through something like COVID-19 in our lifetimes. So we immediately went into a mode of let's assemble the best of the best. Let's make sure that we deliver information. It wasn't sales. It wasn't we're trying to capture people. It was about information. And a lot of our phones were all ringing off the hook back at the time. Like, how should we handle this? How do we do this? And we delivered it, and we had a great turnout every week. A lot of the names I'm seeing here, welcome back. And thank you for some of the comments on the opening song. I like to throw a little Bon Jovi in there in the beginning. So it was time to get the band back together with another difficult topic. And once again, I had last couple of weeks, I personally have been fielding a lot of calls saying, hey, you've prepared us for fire emergencies. You've prepared us for other security related events. What are you guys doing about civil unrest? How do we prepare for that? And rather than going building by building, door to door, we said, let's put together a webinar. And not only a webinar, let's get the best of the best to help us with that webinar. And you're going to hear from Mr. Jim Batelli today, retired chief of police from Mahwah, who's going to talk to us today about how things we should be thinking about. Jim and I don't have a political skin in the game. There's nothing. Our goal today is to achieve, to get you protected, hoping nothing ever happens, but to get you thinking about what you should perhaps be thinking about in preparation for what we hope never happens. And that's what security is all about, right? It's taking that time, it's that insurance policy, hoping something doesn't happen, but being prepared should it happen. And it's hardening the target, as he and I like to say, with law enforcement background. There's no perfect solution for anything. So when you leave today's presentation, you're not going to be a civil unrest expert, but you will hopefully have more nuggets and more information than you did before you joined us here today. So as you could maybe not tell, but I could tell that I'm excited about getting the band back together and seeing their faces and having all these people back in the audience again. Miss you guys. So let me turn it over to the voice of voices, Nick Carlson, to get us going today.
Okay, thanks, Dino. Welcome back, everybody. We've missed you, as Dino said. We're looking forward to today's virtual town hall. And as we did in the past, we'll have a Q&A section at the end. We also have a drawing for a couple of very good prizes, a couple of nice Amazon prizes. So we're looking forward to that toward the end of our town hall. Today's presenters are Dino. As most people know, Dino has been with planned companies now for about 17 years. Prior to that, he served in the U.S. Marines as a corporal and was a sheriff's officer as well. He was a VP of Planned Security and Lifestyle Services, and today he is the Chief Revenue Officer overseeing all sales and marketing for planned companies. And our featured speaker is James Batelli. James, as Dino mentioned, rose through the ranks at the Mahwah Police Department. He spent 17 years as the chief. He's past president of the Bergen County Police Chiefs and holds a master's from Rutgers and I believe ABD, all but dissertation at John Jay University. Okay, so with no further ado, let me hand this over to Jim.
Thank you. I want to thank Dino and Nick for inviting me here. Plan Properties is an excellent company to work for, and I'm pleased to be part of the team right now as we discuss crisis management. So what we're going to discover or talk about today is just an overview of crisis management and how can you plan for the anticipated civil unrest that may follow the upcoming election. So we're going to discuss topics such as crisis management plan, security best practices, communication, which is key, a business continuity plan, insurance, and then a post-emergency plan, a debriefing after the event occurs. In addition to me, we have some experts that can talk about each of these topics as we move through them.
Go ahead, Vinny. There we go.
So, as we know, as you've heard so many times on the media, we are in unprecedented times. We have COVID-19, we have civil unrest after a number of police-involved shootings, we have race issues. Firearms sales have read a record high of 3.9 million in June 2020, which averages out to about 164,000 guns per day being sold. The most likely scenario we're looking at for civil unrest is following the election. And talking to some officials in NYPD, we're not too concerned about civil unrest election day or even the day after. If it's a prolonged event before we know which candidate wins, we are very concerned about that. But if it turns into a constitutional crisis where one candidate or the other contests the election, that will add another level of anxiety to our society. And as Dino quickly pointed out, we take no political sides in this. But we know if Trump wins, we're expecting a lot of pushback from the left. If Biden wins, we're expecting a lot of pushback from the right. So we have to recognize all the players that will be involved in the civil unrest. And first, we must identify that it's everybody's right to protest. That's part of the basis of our country. No one has the right to loot and break into your company and vandalize or destroy any of your property. And that's what we're going to discuss today. How can you prevent that, or at least put in place best practice to minimize your losses and get back to business, provide the service you provide to your customers as soon as possible. Just as an example, the civil unrest following the George Floyd shooting cost the insurance industry $1 to $2 billion. And that's actually an underestimation of the cost, because what we do know is a lot of companies weren't insured, or they're underinsured, or didn't have the proper insurance. So that was the largest amount paid out in a civil unrest in the history of the United States. If there is civil unrest following the election, those numbers could be dramatically higher.
Thank you, Jim. Just a couple of quick points up. Then if we can go back for a quick second here. Something striking to our audience here, and just to point out to everybody here, the firearm sales, right? So I get a lot of questions in a lot of our high-rise residential communities. A lot of people are buying firearms. Is there something that we can control to know who has firearms in our building now, who's purchased firearms? Something to think about. I'm sure we'll tap on Martin later on in the Q&A about that, but a lot more firearms being sold. Civil unrest, for my friends and the people who are on this call right now in Philadelphia, it's pre-election. And we have civil unrest right now. And sometimes that happens across the entire country when something happens in one geographical area. So we're not promoting the fact that, we're only going to have civil unrest because of this election. We've had a lot of civil unrest events in the past year that had nothing to do with the election. So being prepared are what Jim and I are hoping to do for you today, and we're going to take you through it. But don't just think it's a November 3rd event, because clearly, if you're on with us from Philadelphia right now, you certainly have been experiencing a couple of very tough nights. So hope things loosen for all of you and for all of us, and we'll continue to feed you information. Thank you.
So all companies, regardless of your size, whether you have 50 employees or 500 or 5,000 employees, you should have a crisis management plan. And as Dino said, it shouldn't be developed just for civil unrest. It should take into account any vulnerabilities that your company may have. And the goal of crisis management is to target hard in your facility, whether it's commercial, whether it's residential, whether it's retail, and put in place measures that safeguard your assets. Crisis management is the identification of threats to an organization and its stakeholders, and your stakeholders are your employees, a very critical component. And the methods used by the organization to deal with these threats. The plan must be fluid. What we know in looking at past civil unrest and critical events is that no two are alike. So it's got to be fluid, it's got to be able to change on the fly, but you've got to have the pieces of the puzzle in place in order to make those changes. And you've got to have the staff in tune with what's going on in your organization. Planning, as we say, is the key component for all significant initiatives. And the planning is an ongoing process. It doesn't stop after the election, as Dino alluded to. It continues on a year-round basis, and it will make you a more successful company if a crisis comes your way.
Agreed. Okay, so we have a poll there, but I just wanted to add to what Jim just said when it comes to planning, you know, being part of a company called Planned, we absolutely can't stress this enough. When an event happens, when you're in the middle of an event, it's too late for planning. So the preparation, the hardening of the target, it's an insurance policy. Security is an insurance policy, making sure that you've done everything possible to try to coerce someone who's going to do something bad to your property, your community, to go to a different property or community, because we made it harder for them to do it to yours. So we're going to walk you through today, Jim and I, what we think some key points in planning, some things you should be thinking about. And then, of course, we're going to help. And we're going to leave you with a checklist at the end of the day so that you have stuff. But I think we have a poll right now because we want to find out. And I'm curious. Nick, go ahead. I'm curious to know what's the answer to this.
Okay, yeah, we do have a little poll here. How many of us on this call have a crisis management plan in place today? So if you just take a second and answer that question, we'll come back in a minute and share the results.
You're not going to do that music?
No, we'll give everybody a minute here to
All right.
go through it, okay?
Take your time.
All right.
All right, we're ready for Jim.
So, see if we can get this off the screen. So we, in the jurisdiction I worked in, we had a lot of Fortune 500 companies, Jaguar, UPS, Land Rover, Dress Barn, Amazon. We had a tier 1 federal facility in our jurisdiction also. So we work with them to develop best practices in putting together a crisis management plan. And with Planned Properties, we put together a crisis management plan outline listing the general steps, and we'll go through them rather quickly through the slide presentation. The first one is to assess the risk that your company may face. Every company is a little different depending upon where you're located and what you may feel could occur to your company. You want to determine the impact of each crisis on your business. Is it going to make you close your business completely? You're going to alter your hours. And then when we get to the nuts and bolts of the crisis management plan, you want to consider the action you would have to take to resolve each type of crisis. And that's where you have to really sit down, designate your crisis management team, and really come up with a plan on what you have to do in order to minimize the impact of the crisis. You want to decide the resources you will need and the actions you need to take in each scenario. Each scenario takes or requires certain resources to, rise above what occurred. And this is somewhat more difficult because you have to keep on making your list current. You want to decide who will be involved, who are the stakeholders in the actions. Some of you have residential buildings, you may want to include some of your residents. Certainly you want to include your employees and administrative personnel. You want to revisit the plan frequently. This isn't something you dust off, you take off the shelf and dust off every time you think something's coming down the pipe. Whether it's a hurricane or a man-made disaster or civil unrest, you want to always have that in the forefront. You want to have it on your computer system so your employees can look at the crisis management plan that you have in place. You want to communicate that on a regular basis because you also want to alleviate the fears of your employees. When you have employees that don't know what's going on in your organization, and they see something coming down the line like civil unrest, your work productivity minimizes, and they spend more time talking about the crisis than they do with their work product. So you want to let them know that management is on top of the game. You have corporations like Planned Properties that is working with your organization to create a crisis management plan outline to really address any type of situation that may come down the road. And there are a lot of situations that may occur. And sometimes the plans are very similar, but again, you may have to kind of keep them fluid and work through them as the situation evolves, because all these situations evolve in a different way.
Absolutely, Jim. Thank you. And that's a great format for what to follow. And I will tell you, there are team members here with you today. There are panelists who can help in a lot of different variations in putting a plan together. A lot of what Jim just told you about, when we get into the Q&A, we have specialists here that can dive into a lot of these areas. Technology comes to mind, right? So Jim points out how important communication is. I couldn't agree more. Plan has solutions around technology and communicating. There are other important areas that you want to do when creating your plan that our panelists here will be able to help you with, from legal advice to transportation to financial things to consider, certainly insurance. We have a lot of folks here today, and yes, painting for post event. So we have a lot of people who'll be able to help you create your plan with the checklist that we're going to provide for you later on in our event today. So great points, great guideline here. Don't worry about taking notes, folks. We are going to provide this to you at the end. You'll be able to take this away, this presentation away with you today. So some of you have been asking in the chat about will you have this takeaway? You will. We'll get it to you. So don't worry about notes. Other thing I want to remind everybody as we're going through your Q&A. So click on the Q&A button and feel free to start lobbing in questions here for Jim for the end, which we'll do first, and then any of our other panelists. So feel free to jump in, click on that Q&A button. This way we'll have your questions lined up. We'll take it first come, first serve. Thank you, Jim. Move on. There we go.
So the crisis management plan goals. One of the first things you want to do is set out what are the goals that you want to accomplish in creating a crisis management plan. The first thing, as we say, you want to protect your employees. Next, you want to protect your customers. For those who have residential buildings, you want to protect your residents. Certainly, you want to protect your assets, because that lets you get up and running as soon as the crisis is over. And a firm business continuity plan. A lot of people, they create the crisis management plan, but then when the crisis is over, they don't know how to get back up on their feet. So a business continuity plan, while it's part of the crisis management plan, a lot of the people consider that separate. It all fits into one puzzle, and all the pieces have to work together in order to have a complete and comprehensive crisis management plan.
Agreed. Keep rolling, Vint.
Okay, we have results of our highly scientific poll here. 44% of us do have a plan in place, and 56% currently do not have a crisis management plan in place.
Wow, I'm pretty surprised by those results, but happy to hear it. That's great. And to Jim's point earlier, maybe it's a good time to dust off the plan you already have in place and see if it's still pertinent to where we are today. Because a lot of the folks I talked to did not have a plan in place. So hopefully today, we're going to encourage you to, if you don't have a plan, create one. If you have one, like Jim said, it's time to revisit it and make sure that it's current. Great. Let's keep going.
Those numbers are great. And so what we want to do is, for those of you that already have a crisis management plan, is help you improve it. For those of you that don't, we'll start on the ground floor and work you through all the steps. The very first thing you want to do is conduct a thorough physical security audit. And when I talk to people and I've asked them if they've done it, they say, yeah, we walked around the building, it looked great. You know, we took a couple pictures. They walked around in the middle of May when it was 82 degrees out and a nice day. That's not when you conduct a physical security audit. You want to conduct a physical security audit at nighttime when it's dark out. You want to conduct it during different seasons of the year when the leaves are off the trees, when the leaves are on the trees, because there's different perspective during each of those time seasons. Certainly now with the leaves coming down, it opens up the visibility to your business more so than in the summer months. But why you want to walk around at the nighttime when it's dark, you want to make sure that the perimeter exterior lighting is lighting up all the areas around the building. You want to make sure that the CCTV cameras that you have in place aren't washed out by the late lights and are providing enough lighting to see the images that you need. You want to identify the weak points. First, you want to identify all your access points and windows and doors to the building, because we all know the main doors, but we all know that there's loading docks that often aren't locked. And there's also that back door of most buildings in factories where people go out to grab a smoke or grab lunch or something that are chocked open. You want to take measures to eliminate those doors that are left open. Some of the areas you want to look at, poorly lit areas for hiding, especially landscaping. Do they hide areas that people can get access to the roof? Do they hide areas where they can get access to entry doors or egress doors? You want to look at architectural features that can be defaced. You have statues or company logos outside of your building that you may want to cover temporarily, because the looters, that's part of their process, are defacing symbols of capitalism. You want to look for valuable items you may have outside of your building. You want to take pictures of the surrounding building. One of the things we've started to doing in the last couple of years is we incorporated a high-end drone team, and I'm sure Planned Properties can help you with that. The nice thing about drones, you can do a lot of aerial views to show evacuation routes and access routes to your company, but it gives you a different perspective of your facility from up in the air rather than walking around the ground. You can also do the drone circular around your whole facility and get an idea of where the CCTV cameras are placed, where your lighting is placed, where all your perimeter doors are, your access doors, and it gives you almost like a 3D image of your corporation. So if you have access to a drone company and can do that, it's certainly, and it's very inexpensive nowadays, it's certainly much better to just taking photographs, although if that's all you have, that certainly is a start. But you want to do your security walkarounds different times of the years, always when it's dark and night out, dark lighting conditions out, so you can see how your building is viewed, because that's typically when your looters are going to attack or your vandalists are going to attack your facility.
Thanks, Jim, and I couldn't agree more. And, you know, I personally have, with a lot of the folks on the call today, have done these audits with you, for you, side by side with you, through planned companies, and we're happy to assist where we can, you know, not just giving you the roadmap to building a plan, but actually sitting with you. You want to partner with a company who's not just going to think about stuff like this when it's DEFCON level 10. You want to partner with a company who's thinking about stuff like this throughout the year, always, before the 4th of July, before Christmas, before the holidays. You want to make sure that you have a team, which, like we do, and we do have a drone, by the way. We've had it. I'm not good at flying it, not even going to try. But we do have a drone. We are able to help with security assessments, putting a plan together for you, with you, alongside you, with everything Jim's bringing to you here today. So for sure, we're not going to leave you in the dark after drawing up this plan for you today, or things you should be thinking about. We'll be here for you should you need us going forward. So thank you, Jim. Happy to point those things out.
So you want to secure your premises. This comes from a commander I know at NYPD. This is what they're advising their businesses and their corporations around New York City. The following should be removed from sidewalks, plazas, and the front of premises. And it's easily understandable why if you've watched some of the demonstrations in New York City. Street furniture, chairs, tables, anything that they can use to throw through windows. Sanitation trash cans, small planters, construction barrels, any types of temporary signage that can be removed from the building or your facility outside. Wooden or plastic skid pallets in front of the store. You don't want anything piled or stacked up next to your building, because those are often torched. Sometimes they'll drag the pallets out into the middle of the roadway and torch them. Any non-fastened miscellaneous items, dumpsters. We all have dumpsters behind our building. You want to make sure they're chained and immobilized. If you can, have them emptied if you think that there's demonstrations imminent. One of the things that protesters like to do, drag them into the middle of the street and set them on fire. So if you can immobilize them so they can't be dragged, that's great. If not, make sure you have a secure padlock and chain so they can't get into them. These are just common sense approaches. And this type of walk around obviously can be done during daylight hours to see the movable objects that should be removed and stored in your facility for a temporary period of time.
Yeah, for our residential community, I just from inside out now. So absolutely the outside, everything Jim's saying certainly applies. If you're a residential high rise, we don't know if it's coming, if we're going to have protests from within, so we're talking about keeping people on the outside safe by removing these items. You may want to also, property managers, do walkthroughs inside your facilities, inside your property to see, do we absolutely need to have this trash can here right now? Can we remove it for a time frame? Everything Jim's saying here, but just think about it from an inside out perspective. So security outside, absolutely harden that target. But what if that protester is already inside as a residential community with 500 residents? So the more we get out of the way right now, the less flying objects we have, the less items that we have that can break and destroy property. Let's get them out of the way in preparation. So thank you, Jim.
And the last thing I just wanted to add to that side is you want to inform your residents and you want to inform your employees why you're moving some of these objects back inside. Certainly those are considered amenities if you have lunch tables outside. So just to explain it so they don't think you're reducing the amenities or you're reducing certain opportunities they had, explain to them why you're taking the actions that you're doing for the safety and precautions of everybody involved. So we just want to go over some quick security best practices. Your security cameras, confirm they're working. Can you remotely access them from another site? A lot of times we'll go to crime scenes and we'll ask for the security cameras, and lo and behold, they haven't worked in 4 to 6 months. They haven't had a technician in there. You want to make sure they're working. You want to make sure they're aimed properly at the areas that you want them to be able to view. A lot of times after winds, and we certainly had some storms flow through our area, the cameras are blown off track a little bit. So you want to make sure they're aimed where they should be. Some of the cameras can be remotely controlled. You want to make sure your alarm system is working. You want to test that with your alarm company. We always recommend that you have a cellular backup system for your alarm company. If power goes out, and these protesters know that, or these looters know that, they cut the telephone lines, and your pretty much alarm is inoperable. When you have a cellular backup, it goes to a cellular phone, which usually is still operational. So if you don't have it, you may not be able to get it before the election day, but it's always good to have a cellular backup just for burglaries and things like that. We've had a number of gangs in the James Bond gang in particular that hit our area pretty hard. They were notorious for cutting the phone lines, and for residential areas that didn't have cellular backups, they would get in very easily without the alarms getting in. Boarding up windows and doors, something you've seen very frequently around major urban areas in the city. Do you have a vendor that can perform the work if necessary? I spoke with my brother-in-law who manages a building in New York City in the Diamond District. He's saying now that 4x8 sheets of plywood are at a premium. So you may want to stockpile them if you can get them, and make sure you have a vendor that can at least install them. So these are considerations you may want to take, but certainly you want to reach out to vendors and see what services they can provide to you shortly after the civil unrest quiets down, or prior to the civil unrest if you want to fortify your building. A lot of people don't have the steel gates on the doors. They use the plywood, and that certainly will deter the looters from getting inside. And what we found out is they want to get in and out as quick as possible to avoid detection. If they've got to hack their way through plywood, they're moving on to the next building that just has glass windows that aren't protected. The best defense is a good offense. You want to have good plywood protecting all your exterior windows and doors. You want to have visible security guards. We recommend unarmed guards. Armed guards are just too much liability for you to have on premises. You certainly don't want to be the lead news story on the 10 o'clock news the following day if one of those security guards that are armed shoots one of the looters. That's not the image for your company. You want to probably increase the number of security guards on your premises and have them in a very visible fashion outside your store. There is strength in numbers. We maybe had one security guard, you want to have 2, 3, or 4. You want to make sure they have outerwear that identifies themselves as security guards. All states have requirements for security guards. In New Jersey, it's a SORA license. You want to check with your outside contractor, make sure they're all certified. A lot of times, because there's such a demand now, they're just hiring people off the street. That's not good in terms of liability reasons. And the attorney on staff here today can probably talk to that a little bit more. So in a nutshell, our recommendation is unarmed security guards, increase the number of security guards you have, make sure they have visible outerwear, make sure they have the respective training required by the state that they're licensed in.
Absolutely, Jim. Couldn't have said it better, of course. I think having the proper, and that's why we brought this team together again, the panelists, there's a lot of our panelists here today who can help in everything Jim's talking about here and getting you prepared. But everything he's saying is about hardening the target, making sure the goal is for a looter or someone who wants to cause harm to your building to look at it, see additional security, see extra measures that you've taken that the building next door didn't have, and push them off and get them away. As he mentioned, they want to get in, they want to get out, they want it to be easy. So the more we do ahead of schedule, and of course, from plan's perspective, we do have those certified, bonded, licensed security officers that Jim was referring to. And we are absolutely here to help when and if you require them for your building. So fantastic. Great job, Jim. Let's keep going.
And one other thing real quick I'll just go over is if you've watched some of the videos about what's occurring in the country already, and I was talking to Dino about it yesterday, these looters are showing up with equipment to move product out of a building. There was a Walmart, they showed up with hand trucks and pallets on wheels to move TVs out. So these people, they're organized. They're coming in with one sole purpose, to steal your product and damage your building. You've got to harden that target. You've got to go to the next level to make it more difficult to get them in. How to protect your facility, test. You want to test your fire and protection systems in advance. You want to assess your windows, your doors, your other points of entry. You want to know where each and every one of them are. You want to make sure they're secure at night. We'll talk about it in a minute. Designating certain staff to make sure when that building is shut for the night, all the windows are locked, all the doors are locked, the lights are on so law enforcement can see from the inside. You want to prioritize. You want to prioritize employee and residential protection. As I said, when you get up in business and back up in business, you want to have your employees coming back. You want to have your residents staying there. If they don't think you protected them, they're jumping ship. So that's why employee communication to your residents is so critical. And it should come from a relatively upper level of management. It should show some empathy and some concern for their safety.
Love it. Let's keep rolling, Ben.
So what you want to do, make plans for your employees, logistics for employees. Are you going to alter your hours? You're going to close early or open later on and close early for the safety of your employees. You want to make sure that they have the proper tools and equipment to safeguard their building. The closing procedures for premises. We'll talk about it in a minute. You want to make sure notification goes out, and we'll talk about some of those platforms. Deliveries. If you get regular deliveries to your company, you want to talk to delivery companies and maybe reschedule them. If Amazon or FedEx or DHS leaves packages outside the building, that's not something you want to occur during civil unrest, or if they leave them just in an open lobby, you want to hold them and maybe have some of your staff go and pick them up at the facilities. Employment equipment shutdown. If you have computers. If it's a factory type building, you want to make sure everything is shut down and powered down in a normal process way. Products removed from the window fronts and interior of the store where they can be seen. You know, if you have high-end products or really any type of products, you want to remove them, put them back in a warehouse or in a storehouse where the looters can't see them.
Only quick thing I want to add to the residential folks on the call here today. Everything Jim's saying is critical. This security is inconvenient. He and I both agreed when we chatted yesterday. People are going to be inconvenienced when you take proper precautions for your communities. Communicating to them, making sure they understand, you know, we're going to shut down this amenity for these 2 days in advance. We're making that decision as a building. Sorry, it's an inconvenience for you right now, but it's for your own safety. The more you communicate with them, the more they understand the why of what you're doing and the importance of it, and for their safety, the better. And you can blame it on Jim and me if you want and say, you know, we had experts tell us this is the right steps to take. So this is what we're doing. But the earlier you communicate, the better. If you don't have a communication system, now's the time to be thinking about that. How are we going to communicate with our residents? How are we going to communicate both people who are stuck in or people who are out? How will we get that message across? Again, we can help you with that. Oh, what a perfect segue into communication. Jim?
It's the more you harden your target, the more inconveniences that your residents or employees will face, but the quicker you'll be back up in business. Businesses may be closed for weeks or months because they didn't have a crisis management plan. You'll be the business with a solid crisis management plan that'll be open in a matter of days once the civil unrest passes, because you have all these steps in place to reopen. So the inconvenience is temporary. The long-term product is you're up and running, your residents have the amenities back, your business is open, your retail stores are open. Communication, I can't emphasize it enough. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Keep your employees and residents informed with updated and accurate information. If your residents are going to be sheltering in place for several days, make sure they have the medication that some of them may need. So you want to communicate a list of best practices to them, just as you do with your employees. You want to get information not out only to your employees and your residents, but also your customers. How do you do that? Social media is a great platform, whatever you use, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, your own company website. If you're closing early, you want to notify your customers what your new hours are. Do that through the same social media platforms. You want to have mass text messages or emails to employees and residents, but you can only do that if you have updated contact information. In law enforcement, we update our contact information every 30 to 60 days because someone's always getting a new cell phone. Lately nowadays, as new iPhones come out. So you always want to make sure that you have a current contact information update. That should be a most routine, as you require your employees to reset their passwords if you have a system for that every 30 or 60 days, that at the same time get your IT person to say, please update your contact information for us for notification purposes. As I said, you want to keep your vendors updated for scheduled deliveries, maybe cancel them, or maybe move them to certain times when you know employees will be on staff. You certainly don't want any deliveries taking place after hours when no one is there. Also, you want to designate, as I think I said earlier, a person to make sure the building is secure and he's part of your crisis management team. When civil unrest arises or appears imminent, communicate as soon as possible. You don't want to be crying wolf, but at the same time, you don't want to wait till they're breaking down the windows and telling your people to shelter in place and leave the premises. You know, you want to continue, and we'll get into the next slide, monitor social media to determine when these looters or when the civil unrest is occurring, and that can be done through a variety of ways that we'll talk about in the next slide. Keep open lines of communication with local law enforcement agencies. You know, find out if curfews will be implemented. And if curfews are implemented, which that is the first step law enforcement takes to control civil unrest, because they want them off the streets by 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, whatever it is. So you want to find out from law enforcement when curfews will be implemented, But if they are implemented, will your staff, will your employees be able to get to your building if necessary? If you issue ID cards to them, will they be able to cross police lines? Typically, most law enforcement agencies will say yes, unless you're going to endanger those people. You may need to ask, will you provide an escort to my building if necessary? If we get a fire alarm, if we get a burglar alarm. In some cases, they will, depending upon how they prioritize their calls. But certainly you want to meet, at least in person or over the phone, with an administrative level of law enforcement and find out what procedures they're going to have in place if there is civil unrest. A lot of times they may refer you to their website, but of course, if you can develop a personal contact, that doesn't hurt. Sign up for law enforcement notification systems if offered by them or the government. If you go on their website, a lot of law enforcement agencies will use Nixle, but a lot of them use other different platforms. You can sign up right there and you can be notified. But you do want to know, you do want to communicate with law enforcement if your building is going to remain open 24/7 and you're going to have security guards there or employees inside. You want to let them know. So if there's a call there, and certainly everybody's tensions are high, they're going to know that when they get there, there are people on premises, and tell them who they are, what guard company they work for, Planned Properties, they're identified, they have ID cards, or I'm going to have 5 employees on property maintaining the computer system. The exchange of communication, inbound and outbound, is so critical, and we can't emphasize it enough.
Absolutely, Jim. And working with a vendor who does this regularly, who always has a relationship with local law enforcement, who is part of their SOP and procedures is when we come to your community, we establish a relationship and protocols with local law enforcement. We'll make it so that you're ready when something like this happens. You know, law enforcement's busy right now, as I'm sure Jim can attest to. They're getting calls. Everybody's concerned now. When you already had the relationship before, it makes it a lot easier to be able to say, okay, we had this plan in place, all systems go, planned, you met with us, we know who you are, we know the building, we know your staff, we already have our procedure in place. All we're waiting for is the whistle to blow. Do we want to tweak anything like Jim's saying, or is it the right plan already in place? But you don't want to wait. You want to make sure this is something for a lot of the managers out there. You shouldn't be thinking about this. You should have that vendor in place who's thinking about this stuff for you and creating your plan well in advance before the whistle blows. So I want to keep moving along, but we could certainly, if you go to our plan website, you can also find systems around communications that we have out there for you. So to Jim's point, we agree wholeheartedly how important communication is. So we didn't go get something off a shelf or box something up. We created our own communication process, which feel free at your leisure to go see what we recommend.
So last few items, company vehicles. You have large amount of company vehicles, or just 1 or 2 outside your premises. You want to move them inside. You want to move them to an alternate site if possible. Have employees take them home. You don't want to, again, go to the 10 o'clock news and see one of your cars on fire in the center of the street. After business hours, consider temporarily altering hours to protect employees and customers. As I said, and as Dino keeps emphasizing, the safety of your employees, your residents, and your customers are critical. So if you have to minimize your hours a little bit just to make it safer, maybe your profit margin drops a little bit, your ROI isn't what it used to be, it's for the safety and employment of your residents and your customers, and certainly you want to explain it to them. Properly communicate any changes to staff to avoid confusion. Nothing is more damaging to an organization when there's confusion or lack of understanding on what's going on. Evacuation plan, if need be, establish an evacuation plan on how employees can get out of the area. That's why it's good to have a drone overview of the area where your business or your residential facility is. Designate staff that are responsible for securing the property. We touched upon that because it is so important. You know, when it hits the fan, you want to make sure everybody isn't running out the door, that there's part of your crisis team that's going to remain and make sure everything is shut down, and maybe even placing that call to law enforcement saying, we're leaving our premises, we're locking up, and these are the night numbers if you need to contact us or need access to our facility after hours. You want, as I said, you want to notify law enforcement if any employee guard is staying on the premises after normal business hours.
Jim mentioned earlier also there could be a shelter-in-place plan. So in New York, recently, a couple of the team members and I created such a plan. You know, if building was concerned, what if we can't leave? What if there's civil unrest in the street right in front of our building? How do we react? Able to help with that, you know, making sure you have a contingency plan for if we can't go out. So a lot of you may have a fire plan. If there's a fire in the building, how do we evacuate? Where do we go? What do we do? Do you have a plan? Again, part of what Jim's talking about and what we're thinking about today. Do you have a plan if you need to stay in? So getting out is one thing. Staying in is a whole nother ball game, and we can absolutely, again, help you. And some of our checklist items, we'll talk about that after today's presentation.
One thing, protests can turn violent within minutes. You have a protest that's seemingly peaceful, marching down the streets, expressing their opinions, which they have every constitutional right to do. Something happens in that group. There's an interaction, a group in opposition to them come out, and a protest turns violent very quickly. And that's what Dino said. You have to be ready in a moment's notice to say, we're locking up business and we're vacating and we need the employees to leave. Closing up, you need a business continuity plan, because when it's all said and done, the dust settles, you want to get back up in business. You want to provide the same amenities to your residents. You want to provide the same service to your customers, and you want to get your employees back to work. You want to get to business as normal as soon as possible. So if you don't have a business continuity plan, if you don't have one, you certainly need to start that plan. Properties can help you with that. Computer servers, is the data uploaded into a cloud or redundant site? A lot of these looters, they damage the computers just through maliciousness. So you want to make sure, and I'm sure all of you already had it, if not, you should. It should be uploaded to a cloud or redundant site where all your data is stored, your customer base, your vendors, your invoices, your payroll. Power down all the systems before you leave. That may help in some instances in reducing the risks of fire. Can your business function operate remotely if necessary for a couple days during the unrest? There's nothing better than still being able to operate remotely while the civil unrest is going on. That may not be in your business plan, it may be. If it is, you want to tweak that model a little bit in the next couple days. Preparatory steps can limit losses and result in quicker opening. The recovery action can get you back on your feet sooner, and that's what our goal is in presenting this to you. Minimize your losses, get back on your feet sooner, get your business up and running, provide all the services that you're committed to.
Yep, let's keep going, Vin.
Insurance company, and there's a professional on staff here that'll talk about it. As I said, in the George Floyd, $1 to $2 billion, the highest amount paid in civil unrest in the history of our country. And a lot of companies found that they were underinsured, they didn't have business continuity insurance. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, and I'll turn it over to the insurance professional. But you want to make sure you have the proper coverage to insure your losses that may occur.
And we'll get to Ryan first, right after the presentation here for you folks to talk about a little bit about what Jim's talking about here.
Post-emergency plan. Have a post-emergency plan in place. That's not a business continuity plan, a little bit different. This is a debriefing plan. After it's all done, give everybody a chance to take a step back and breathe. You want to bring your crisis management team together and talk about what worked and didn't work. In addition to your crisis management team, you want to start a poll or a little questionnaire to your employees and residents. What were you happy with? What weren't you happy with? What were you satisfied with? What could we have done better to make it more secure? Hopefully it's all positive, but listen, nothing's perfect. Improvement is a constant battle, and it's a constant evolving situation. So you always want to work to improve your plan. You want to involve as many people as you can, but certainly a crisis management team wants to debrief afterwards and decide what works and what didn't work. Stay informed, and this is my favorite portion when we talk about civil unrest. Social media. I mean, because you sit in your store and you wonder what's going to happen. All these protest groups advertise there, or not advertise, but post information on various social platforms. And there's literally hundreds of them. New York City, we were monitoring hashtag protest NYC. They were talking about where the protest groups would meet, what the route of travel would be, what some of the targets would be. There's sites like Antifa International, Jersey Antifa, Philly Antifa. There's one Antifa North Jersey, Antifa NJ. As much as you can think of these sites, there are hashtags or names where you can go to and find out and get information. So you may want to have one or two of your staff follow some of the media. There's a website, Southern Poverty Law Center. It shows where 490 hate groups, it's an interactive map, are working in this country. It's pretty interesting. You just click on your city and you can see whatever hate groups are there. And then you can look for the social media outlets that they may use. It takes a little time, it's time consuming, but the time may be well spent in learning where these protest groups may be organizing. And typically they'll say, we're going to meet in Central Park and we're marching up this avenue and this is where we're going to end up. That's the information you want to know. And if you know it at the same time the protesters do, you're ahead of the game. News outlets, you want to watch whatever you choose, Fox, CNN, MSNBC. You want to be most aware when and where the civil unrest is most likely to occur and take a proactive approach to protect your business and assets. So, in summary, you want to harden your target as much as possible. You want to develop a very comprehensive crisis management plan. You want to work with your vendors, your employees, your customers, your residents, because it's a team effort to combat this. And if you do that and you follow the steps recommended by Planned Properties, I think you'll be successful and I think you'll be back on your feet. Hopefully this doesn't occur, but if nothing else, it's a test to see how your crisis management plan works and is in place. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much. It's incredible information, and we're so fortunate to have you here with us today, and honored to have been able to present and spend some time with you today. And such valuable information that, again, we'll share with everybody here. Something happened last week that I think kind of triggered a little bit of my interest in wanting to put something like this together. In visiting with a property, a potential property, a prospect property, someone said to me, well, we're not a target. No one hates us, so we're not going to be affected by civil unrest, or there's no one out to get us, and it's not about that. And Jim and I were laughing a little bit about it yesterday. It's not if you have a valuable, if you have a property, if you have something that a looter may want, it's not about you. This isn't personal. A lot of what's happening out there has nothing to do with your political stance or whether you perceive yourself as to have haters. This is just something that has the potential of happening and has the potential of getting worse if you don't prepare. So just like you don't want a fire to happen in your building, just like you don't want some other miserable event to happen in your building, the more you prepare for it, the better prepared you are for it, the more limited you are to having destruction. So we're here to help. I do want to start, go to, so just some basic information here. Nick, if you can get my panelist slide up, that would be fantastic, because there's a few here that I know will absolutely be able to help, but I want to get to Ryan first, because, and we'll give Jim some air, get some rest and maybe get a sip of water or something in you, because you've been talking for a while here, and we'll certainly get to questions for Jim. But Ryan, I want you to flow a little bit on what you heard today. And you saw we put up a slide on insurance, and Jim talked about it. Is there something about insurance that you want to talk about?
Hey, Dino, yeah, Jim, thanks so much. It was a great topic to dive into. Dino, thanks for putting this on. So listen, this has been the last 7-8 months where I'm sitting up here telling everybody there's no insurance coverage for anything. This is the first opportunity that I get to say that, guess what, there is insurance coverage for these types of events. So there's two things that Jim had mentioned, and there's two things we need to be aware of. So the trigger on most, if you know, the vast majority of insurance policies out there is civil commotion or civil unrest. That's the trigger. So as soon as you trigger that policy with that occurrence, well, now all of a sudden you have coverage for your property, your stuff, your things, assuming that you've bought proper limits, meaning enough coverage for your building or enough coverage for the things you have inside the building. Well, then you've got the right coverage. But that's not where this thing ends. As we know, once we have the event, once this thing hits us, now we're going to have to get back up, get off of our, get off our backs and try to rebuild ourselves. And there's some continuity in there. So there's normally a business income type coverage. It's called business income for companies. And when your company is down and you cannot operate, that does trigger business income. So you'll have coverage for the income that you would have normally made during that time period that you're down and cannot operate. That being said, there's a deductible in there for business income. It's usually a time deductible. Policies differ. Sometimes it could be 24 hours. So your business is shut down. You have a time deductible of 24 hours before you start getting that income that you would have ultimately had. The deductibles go all the way as high as 72 hours, maybe even higher. Take a look at the policy. So you want a lower time limit. So when your business is down, lower the time limit before coverage starts paying you back. That's of course ideal. So just understand that there is coverage. You really want to dive into your policy. It should be something, and I know Jim talked about it. It's part of your planning process. How am I going to get back up onto my feet? How do I rebuild? If it's not going to be from an insurance product, then it's going to be out of your pocket. So now's the time to plan for it. And the good news is insurance is designed to cover these types of occurrences.
Fantastic, Ryan. Really appreciate that. I'm sure we'll probably talk to you again before we're done here. Why don't we do a drawing? I think we are ready to pick our first winner of the day. And then Martin, get ready because I'm going to come pick on you in a second here. So can we do our first drawing?
Yes, we are ready. Thank you, Dino, and thank you, Jim, and everybody for attending today. So as promised, we do have a drawing today. We have 5 prizes. The first winner will receive a $100 Amazon gift card. The 2 through 4 place winner or 5 place winner will receive a $25 Amazon gift card each. The name of the game was, the more people you refer in, more people who put you down as their referral source, the more times your name appears here. So we thank people. As you can see, we do have a couple individuals who are here more than once, and let's do it. So the first drawing for the number 1 prize, let's do that first, will be right. Ira wins number 1.
All right, Ira.
That one was close.
Congratulations.
Ira, you are a number 1 winner for the $100 Amazon gift card.
Wow. Congrats, Ira. Now, Ira can't win again, right? So everyone else who's on has a chance.
Will be removed.
All right. Congratulations, Ira. You got the big prize. And thank you, Vinny. And as promised, Mr. Cavallaro, I'm going to, you heard plenty of legal stuff in Jim's conversation, my conversation. I'm sure you're chomping at the bit to talk about some of it.
I think the one and most important area I'll address would be use of your residence for any of these purposes. I do not recommend that. And what do I mean by that? A lot of communities set up a neighborhood watch program, right? And there's some significant risk to that because it's assumed once you have one of those that it's kind of sanctioned by your community association or by your building, right? And the fact of the matter is, if an individual actor goes out and does something, and it results in injury to somebody else, and that person was part of that, that neighborhood watch, well, that person is not going to have the same type of pockets in a liability circumstance as the association, right? So in all likelihood, the association is going to end up in that litigation, in that lawsuit, with an allegation that this was something they permitted or sanctioned. And so first and foremost, you want to rely on vendors for these types of things. It shifts some liability for the association, and the vendors have appropriate insurance to cover these types of circumstances, right? Whereas the association, with respect to something like that, might not have insurance, and I can let Ryan speak to that if he wants to, but oftentimes you might not have insurance for something like that because it might be seen as an intentional act, right? So first and foremost, neighborhood watch, I don't recommend. Now, that's different than see something, say something, right? If you do see something in your neighborhood where you live, yes, report it to management, report it to your vendor, report it to the police, but make sure your residents aren't taking it upon themselves to intervene, particularly if they live in a community association, because it could be seen as acting on behalf of that association, or it could at least just be alleged in that manner. And you end up in a situation with liability the association was never even anticipating having to take on. So I think first and foremost, that is definitely the most important. And if you guys have any other topics or questions for this, Dino, I'm happy to answer those as well.
No, thank you. I'm curious to bring Jim back in for another second here, because I'm sure in his communities up there in Mahwah and in a lot of areas, neighborhood watch was something that the law enforcement was called upon a lot to help with. And I think Martin makes some great liability concerns. And heck, I've been asked in a lot of our communities with Plan to set up programs and neighborhood watch programs. So
let me just clarify too. I mean that these people, if they are established, should not be intervening, right? It should be part of the association's policy that individuals not intercede in any altercation, not put themselves into any situation. It's simply reporting back to somebody, right? And that's why I said the see something, say something is very important. And that I think is ultimately going to assist law enforcement. And that is something that can be promoted. But you need to have a specific policy in place that tells these individuals who are part of that neighborhood watch not to intervene and not to intercede in these types of.
I 100% agree with you, my friend. I think you're spot on. I'm curious on Jim's perspective and what he's thinking.
I'm sorry, Dino, I didn't hear what he was saying, but I heard your comments about neighborhood watch. Neighborhood watches are almost like crisis management plans. Until something happens, people don't want to get involved. As soon as we have a couple residential burglaries, everybody's scrambling for a neighborhood watch program. Once they die down, no one's involved. But certainly, if I understand what he's saying, having the people involved, getting an extra set of eyes and ears for business management is critical.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what Martin said. And then, you know, it just, I know what he's saying is it doesn't replace certified, bonded, and licensed folks at your property. It's they're an extra set of eyes. But some communities, you know, to maybe save a buck, are going to use existing residents who are not trained, who don't have the backing of a company, who don't have the licensing that they need, are going to go out and play cops and robbers. It's not the same. It's great if you're using them for eyes. That's nice and it helps. You know, every little bit helps. But I hear what Martin is saying loud and clear. So,
and around the country, there have been lawsuits filed against associations in connection with the neighborhood watch that goes too far, right? That goes beyond the see something, say something role when they intercede and it results in either personal injury or worse, death to somebody. We have seen the association get sued for that. So you have to be, you know, make sure you have a clear set of policies in place about what that neighborhood watch is actually designed to do and what more specifically they should not be doing.
Love the message. Yeah.
You know, Jim had said something earlier too. He had said something, listen, armed guards probably not the best idea. I want to touch on that as well, just to support that position. Armed guards, although may make a building feel safe, it really is exposing the building to quite a bit of liability. There's so many things that can go wrong and very few things that go right because of that armed guard. So let's keep an eye on that as well. So you've got highly untrained people that we don't want to have, you know, running around playing cops and robbers. And then we have people that may be a little bit too overtrained.
Yeah. No, I agree. Look, being in this business for 17 years here at Plan, we've made decisions a lot about whether armed was the right thing, but we strongly feel if you have the properly trained people who can diffuse a situation and not escalate a situation, to what Jim was speaking about earlier. If you have folks who are trained, and this is how to handle, the gun isn't going to make anyone a better security diffuser. It's not going to, and in some cases, it can escalate a situation. And a lot of this civil unrest came at the hands of a weapon. So we have to consider right now, and Plan certainly has a stance that we believe that if you have highly trained, highly qualified people who have great supervision and are on the cusp of learning every day, and training and how to handle things, and heck, even law enforcement is learning every day about civil unrest and how to handle things, and they're re-looking at their training protocols. But you certainly want to have a company who's not saying the reason you hire us is because we have a gun, right? Like that doesn't make you a great company. What makes you a great company is if you say we can handle any situation that may come up by de-escalating, diffusing, fixing, correcting. Jim mentioned earlier that after you create a plan, you got to keep going back to it and reassessing what worked and what didn't work. He talked about practicing and making sure so these things become second nature. I was part of the Marine Corps, and we practiced for war, hoping that war would never happen. But that's what these folks are doing every day. They're still out there practicing, because when the bell goes off, you can't be looking at each other saying, what do we do? So if you align yourself with an organization that promotes rest, promotes no violence, and how you end it, then you don't need those things. And you don't have to even consider having to have people with weapons. So thank you, Ryan. I agree. I want to get to some of our other friends here, but first, I think, Nick, you have a question for Jim. Am I correct?
Yes, Dino, I do. Sorry, my camera stopped working here for some reason. Good time for that, I guess. Jim, we do have a question from Marianne in the audience. Do you have any advice for commuting to and from work during unrest and rioting?
Well, we suggested, we had a situation in town not too many years ago. We suggested pooling, carpooling, even if it's a cost for the company to provide a small van to transport their employees to a neutral location where the cars were parked. It was a small cost, and it really demonstrated to the employees the concern that the company had for their safety and welfare. So that small cost went a long way to getting that extra level of commitment from your employees. So yes, you don't want 30, 40 cars on lot. If you can get one of these small buses or small minivans and they park their cars, 3 or 4 miles away outside of the area of concern and transport them in, that is ideal if your company can manage that.
A great question. Appreciate the answer, Jim. That's perfect. Nick, did you have another question standing by before I get to Mr. Venturino to talk a little bit? I know he's chomping at the bit here.
Not right now, Dino. All
right, let's get to Ray. Ray, City Fire and Fire, what's been going on?
Well, I think with this topic, what you want to kind of consider, and I'm sure you guys will agree with me, I'll throw some things out there. You guys can comment. Consider that the fire department can't get to your location. If there is a high density of people that are protesting in your area where your building is, if you think about it, the fire department may or may not be able to get their truck to your building if people are starting a fire or putting a fire. You see fires in all these civil unrest videos, so it is a common thing. So I would say that you want to be aware that maybe you can't get a fire truck to your building at that point. I think that's a valid point. A lot of these high-rise buildings have fire safety coordinators, which they should implement, have them on staff the whole time while something is going on. Also, I'm sure you guys would agree that this is all going to be in major cities mostly. Is that what you're finding, that these civil unrests happen in major cities or dense populated areas?
Well, there's no known for that, Ray, but I think what you're presenting, and I'm sure Jim would attest to, we worry about the event within the event, right? So it starts off, and we talk about this in law enforcement all the time, it starts off as civil unrest and someone has a heart attack. And then there's a fire. And then, so it's the events within the events that we have to get to that start out as one thing. So you run to that issue, and then all of a sudden you have 3 or 4 other issues. Jim, would you agree to that, or is that a concern?
Yes, wholeheartedly. What you said was accurate.
Yeah, so the fire becomes one of those events, and that's when you have to either take things into your own hands or have a different plan, let's say a plan of action, to make sure that you can fight the fire, or put out the fire, or do something to have a, maybe you're not going to have the fire department available at that point. That's one of my points.
Totally agree, Ray. And having someone like Ray and City Fire as part of your crisis management plan is smart, because here Jim and I are talking about civil unrest today, but if during that civil unrest a fire should happen or something around, to what Ray's saying, how are we going to get those teams in? That should be part of your plan for sure. And I'm sure Ray and City Fire would be happy to help us create that plan and have a backup.
Also, you should consider having like proactive fire watch, which we know that plans can help the property managers do that. Get extra hands on deck, extra people in your building, extra maintenance people, extra security people in the building to do like a fire watch, because the earlier you catch the fire, you may be able to put it out yourself, or call earlier. Those things, time is so important when it comes to saving people's lives or putting out the fire. So you might want to add more fire watch to during that civil unrest, or if it's coming. I think that's a good point.
Without a doubt, Ray, appreciate it, pal, and great seeing you. It's 12:15. You guys can start eating now if you want to. So whoever got me the chicken parm sandwich, send it right over. I can certainly go for that right now. Why don't we go to something a little lighter? And because she's smiling over there, Kim, you knew I was coming to you. Pool season was fun this year, huh? And where are we now? What do you got? What do you got for us?
Well, I know that right now, the last thing that anybody wants to think about is pools. It's starting to get cold out. Most people have their pools covered. So pools are out of sight, out of mind. But, as Jim was talking about, part of not really civil unrest, but part of what I do is making sure that these properties are protecting their assets. And a pool is the asset that I get to help you guys out with. So just a couple of quick things. We're not really sure what 2021 is going to bring us with COVID, but we are trying to plan for that season with our property managers. But right now, some of the things that we're asking you guys to think about is, believe it or not, this weekend, the temperatures are dropping down into the high 20s, low 30s. So if you haven't winterized your freshwater fixtures, showers, hose bibs, water fountains, you need to do that. You want to prevent pipes from breaking, and you want to make sure that you protect your wherever your pool is located. You don't want to show up, because pipes will break in the middle of the night and you show up the next day and your clubhouse is flooded. So you want to make sure that you've winterized those freshwater fixtures. If you did nothing with your pool in 2020, if you didn't have it maintained, if you didn't have a professional look at it, remember the winterization that you do to the pool only lasts for one season. So if you winterized your pool in 2019, it's not going to last for the 2020 winter. So you want to make sure, if you didn't have a professional look at it, you want to make sure that if there's any damage to the pool from not being maintained, the winter's going to compound that, and you don't want to do that. Plus, the winterization is not going to last. So you do need to have your pool looked at. And lastly, don't wait to make a decision on your 2021 contract. Again, I know it's not 80 degrees and the sun's not out here. It's pouring buckets today, but there's going to be a ton of preparation that's going to need to be done to make sure that you're ready for your 2021 pool season. I know a lot of us decided to keep our pools closed. We don't exactly know what the health departments are going to require, but we're preparing that they're going to require the same things they required in 2020. And the sooner we can get a plan in place for you, the safer it's going to be for your residents to open.
Thank you, Kim, and congratulations on a fantastic pool season. I know you guys had to go through jumping through hoops to even have a pool season this year. So speaking to a lot of people, and you guys made them feel a little normal during this crazy time for the summer. And we were happy to partner with you on a lot of stuff throughout the summer. So congratulations and great job to you and your organization. We're going to do a drawing before we get to Mohammed. So certainly this is a financial burden, this civil unrest stuff. And we're going to get to Mohammed in a second here to talk about some things to consider right now during this time. But let's first, Vinny, do we have another drawing for another lucky winner?
Yes, we do. Let me pull that up. Give me 1 second to get back over to that screen, and we will do it. So our second place winner for the $25 Amazon gift card will be Liz.
Oh, Liz, congratulations. Another winner, $25 Amazon gift card for you. We can all use it. Packages are arriving to the house every 3 minutes here, so I'm sure Amazon will love your additional $25. So they need it. So congratulations to you. And thank you, Vinny. And Mohammed, did I give you enough time to prep?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, so Dino, thank you so much to you and your team for inviting me and having me on this panel here today. Jim, great presentation. Thank you. So a couple of things, and one of the things that I want to piggyback off is what Ryan said here, is Ryan used the word deductible. So the one thing that people don't think about and they tend to remove from their budgets when they're doing their budgets, and now is budget season, so it's a perfect time to talk about this, is that yes, you may have an insurance policy and you may be covered by insurance, but you of course have a deductible. And it is imperative that you have in your budget a line item that says insurance deductible, and you cover that cost because you have to pay for it. It's not going to be paid by the insurance company. And a lot of times associations or co-ops or whatever will say that, what are the chances of me actually having this? And there are high chances of having to pay for that deductible. So you should budget for them. The other thing is, and usually you'll find that this line item gets removed, is a line for contingency. It's so important to have a line item for contingency, because if you have situations that you guys are talking about, yes, you may be covered by insurance. Even if you have the deductible line, you may have other expenses that you're incurring. And even now during COVID, you're incurring expenses that you never thought about that you might not be able to put into other line items. So make sure you have a line item there for contingency. We recommend to have it anywhere between 2.5 to 4% of your operating budget. Make sure you have it in there and you're covering for that, because you never know what's going to happen.
Thank you, Mohammed. Agreed. Just like Jim and I have been talking about being prepared, right? Mohammed is saying the same thing around your finances. So a few more to get to here, but I want to tee up JJ because certainly, Plan has seen where we have had an uptick in janitorial needs, certainly security needs throughout the summer. I mentioned we teamed up with pools. JJ, quick 2 minutes on Planned and what's happening and what's going on.
Yeah, thank you, Dino. I think good afternoon, everyone. It's great. One of our mantras in our organization is our commitment to add value. And I think events like this are truly aligned with that commitment. So I hope that everyone is seeing the value of this. But yes, it's definitely something a little bit more specific as it relates to what Jim was saying about getting people there and commuting and carpooling. Things that we have done, and it's part of our protocols, is that we make an analysis of where the associate lives in relation to the building where they work, and we plan alternate routes for them to get there. We know, for example, at plant companies, the associates that rely on public transportation, the associates that they use their own car to get to the building, and we use that information to really prepare in advance. In this case, will be civil unrest or the possibility of some events of such nature. We also it's the same thing that we do when there's, inclement weather, because our commitment to you, our partners, is that we will have the associates at the building. It could be a janitor, it could be a concierge, it could be a courtesy patrol associate. Our commitment is to go above and beyond and have that service provided no matter what's going on. So we look at that. There have been situations where we even will put our associates in nearby hotels, and we, that way we ensure that there's not going to be service disruption to our customers. So those are kind of the protocols that we use. Obviously, if it's a residential building and there's a model in the building and there's a unit available, we have many associates that stay in the building. They don't leave; they decide to stay in the building. That way, again, we are ready to service our partners the following day. So those are things that is already in our DNA per se, in our protocols. And there are times like this when it really makes the sense, and we continue to add value that way, Dino.
Very proud, JJ. And yes, of course, plan, and I know Rob can hear me, and what we've done. And I think we've made our name, our brand, our reputation has been on when the chips are down. Jim mentioned Hurricane Sandy earlier. This is when you prove yourself. This is when you're with a team who delivers. Like every one of these hand-picked best of the best vendors that we've had on these town hall calls, it's everybody delivering on a brand promise. So very proud. And thank you, JJ, and thank you to the planned operations team out there for doing an incredible job during these very troubling and difficult times. And one of those best of the best companies is certainly Ellis. And Ellis, I know you're chomping at the bit there because transportation, we talked about carpooling a little earlier, and you want to tell us a little bit about your brand and your company and what you're doing during these difficult times?
Sure. Thanks, Dino, and good afternoon, everybody. And thanks, Plan, for your leadership once again. And Dino and Jim, excellent presentation, and thank you for your expertise. And I can't begin to tell you how many times from a parking and transportation perspective, we encourage our clientele to do those security reviews, really essential. So I want to make a few points, if I could, from a parking perspective. Certainly with transportation, we do run shuttle services. And as an example, you mentioned Hurricane Sandy. We did a lot of work where we brought vehicles and folks to remote locations to get them out of harm's way. So certainly we're available to do that. But from a parking perspective, that's a very important link in any community's security. And, generally, if you have an attendant service, they're the front line, not only from a street perspective, but also they're ingressing and egressing all the most vulnerable points of the building, whether it be their garage, their interior doors, their lot locations that are remote. They can be your eyes and ears, and they should be part of a security plan, and they need to be trained and be very vigilant. That's something that we're very proud of. We encourage everybody else to be as well. Also want to speak to access control systems. This is something we have at many of our communities and have an expertise on and do consulting with, but making sure that your gates and garage doors are operating functionally and properly. But I can't begin to tell you how many communities actually leave their gates and garage doors open during high volume times. And that's not a good practice on a general basis. Horrible practice if you're in any kind of an emergent situation like we're discussing today. The other thing I want to comment on is cameras. You mentioned the importance of making sure they're operating and functional. That is absolutely right. But also need to make sure that the recording end of it is operational. I can't begin to tell you how many times we've had a situation, go back to look at the recording, and there's a malfunction or it just never was paid attention to and never operating. So very, very important that you consider that and do a check on that. And lastly, we have an app, and I'm sure many, you may as well, Dino, that we actually deploy a command center in our office of all our communities where we're able to get into the camera system and be a second line of defense in watching those type of activities and be able to also, if they haven't recorded it, we do. So we're able to look and be, our approach has always been preemptive. We want to be on top of it and be ready to go. So those are just a few points from a parking perspective.
100% agreed. Thank you. I mean, Jim and I were going back and forth yesterday, and Jim, I don't know if you want to talk about, we did talk about garages and the importance of it. And, you know, we both agreed that, you know, just pulling gates down isn't necessarily a solution for a garage. And Jim, you had a great suggestion. If someone's going to close down a garage, whether it's a residential or commercial property, what did we talk about yesterday you thought could be a great solution?
Well, we had recommended those New Jersey barriers that you can fill with either water or sand, and they can easily close off underground or above ground garages. It's just an option. You know, I don't know all the businesses out there, but it's a consideration if you truly want to make your building secure for an extended period of time.
Agreed. And I thought that, you know, so we were on the same wavelength as you, Ellis, about how important garages are. If someone makes it into your garage, in essence, they've made it into your property, right, into your building. So if it's decided that part of your plan is that you're going to secure and close off garages, just make sure you do it the right way. Don't have a false sense of security that a little arm coming down is going to secure your garage, right, for obvious reasons.
Oh, sure.
Right. So doing it right is what I think Jim and I are suggesting, and making sure that's part of your plan.
Just one further consideration. I think Ray hit upon this from a fire perspective, but I'd say from an emergency services perspective, if you do those close-ups, you do have to have a contingency plan if you need to get in or out, or emergency has to get in or out. So I encourage that being part of the plan as well.
Absolutely. And how do people get you, Ellis, quickly?
They can reach us at APC at advancedparkingconcepts.com. Or you can certainly email me, edumon@advancedparkingconcepts.com, or call us. We're always available for any of this. Thank you, Dino.
Thank you, Ellis. Okay, I got a couple of friends left here. Jeff Shipman, looking strong. You should, because you're with Heartline Fitness, so of course you should be looking strong. Tell us about Heartline, what's happening since we last got together.
Sure. Well, it's been a lovely time, right? All of us going through the challenges. You know, one of the biggest value adds that we've been able to bring to the forefront for our clients is, and it's been a prime tool for us through COVID, but it's also seasonally, it's budget season for us. But we typically are involved in this annually, but it's been ongoing since March, April. So providing assessments to our clients, basically looking at you know, the rationale behind distancing and how to lay out that facility to combat COVID, and also disinfect and preventative maintenance and attacking the airspace with certain solutions that we have. That's been the hottest thing, where we've been the most active. So providing just, you know, a stable ground and an assessment for our client to know, hey, here's what I need to put in place. And you've talked about a lot of planning here today. A lot of what our assessment is putting that plan in place. You think you know a lot about fitness until you talk to us, right? So the assessments have been key for us. The other hot button for us right now is renewals. And we've seen a huge increase in PM renewals and bundling our disinfect and protect program with it. So we've created a lot of awareness of, you just can't spray anything on these, you know, expensive assets, treadmills, ellipticals, bikes. So we've changed what the norm is, not just doing something to create a safe and clean environment with the equipment, but also applying a protectant and a disinfectant to keep you open, keep you going through COVID, and having a safe, inviting environment for the residents. The other thing in particular, I think that this was a great education for me, to be honest with you. So thank you for all of your contributions. You know, home fitness is incredibly hot right now. And my caution and, you know, contribution, I think, to the concerns here with safety and looting, dumbbells have always disappeared in gyms. I don't see anybody carrying a 350-pound treadmill down the street, although you could prove me wrong. But I would think if you are in a situation where windows, smash and grab and go, you can't get fitness equipment right now for the home. It is extremely hard. If you ordered something today, you're probably not getting it till December and January. So if there becomes a situation or event where this stuff is likely grabbed and taken, I would say, think about that, right? And how you harden that space or secure it, because I think people are missing fitness. It's hard to get the equipment. It's expensive to get the equipment. And, if there's an opportunity, even inside the building, outside the building, you're probably going to want to be, hardened in those points to protect yourself. But, other than that, hey, we're hunkered down, we're opening, we're reopening, we're shutting down. We're providing these assessments and planning, and trying to keep people safe, right? And an inviting environment to be well and healthy. And that's what we do. And I appreciate you guys having me on today.
Thank you, Jeff. It wouldn't be an event without you. And, so Jim and I did talk about fitness yesterday and some of the things that, because you're right, these flying objects that you have in your fitness centers, not only to be stolen, but to be used as weapons or glass breaking devices, dumbbells are very good for that, and other events, to be considered. And we did talk about it during his presentation. Is that an area that you may want to consider closing for a couple of days? Is that one of the inconveniences? Just like we don't want people to go swimming right now in Tim's world during a social, a civil unrest situation. Perhaps this is a time to consider limiting the hours of your gym, limiting access, or having better controls over it. Jim and I agreed that was an area that people should consider. Bill Harvey, this is how I know painting. We were laughing earlier, like, what does painting have to do with civil? We found how painting has to do with civil unrest, and then stick around, everybody, because we have two more prizes, and before we wrap up today. So, Bill, I'm handing it off to you, my friend.
Well, thanks again for having us here today. We appreciate it. And I know when, things start going down, everyone starts worrying about the paint jobs. So I want to make sure that we're there to help too. I guess one way that this might be relevant to painting and, just kind of thinking about it a little bit is that in graffiti, if you have a building that's prone to graffiti and it's a reoccurring problem, there are anti-graffiti coatings out there that you might want to consider. It's not going to help your building from a brick or something like that, of course, but if graffiti is an issue, you can use anti-graffiti coatings. They are rather expensive, so it is an investment, but if it is something that happens frequently, it's a lot easier just to wash it off than to have it repainted over and over again. So, as far as the painting business overall, one good thing is regardless of the time, you got to protect your building, you got to keep it coated. And, we've managed to come up with some pretty good safety protocols ourselves this year amongst the pandemic and trying to keep our employees and our customers safe. And it's been a pretty decent year. And, we're just kind of, hoping everything, a lot of this planning is, fail to plan to fail kind of thing, but hoping, plan for the worst, hope for the best. So I think that's just what everyone has to do right now.
And you guys are certainly the best of the best, and we love and appreciate having you here with us today. Nick, there may have been a question, unless I'm wrong. I think I saw something out there, something for Jim?
Yes, Dino, we have one more question, and the question is for Jim. Jim, if there are protesters or crowds in the streets in front of the building, should residents be directed to the back entrance of the building, like through an alley, for example?
Well, I think that's a prudent measure. We've got to understand that protesters have every right to be peacefully protesting in the area, but you don't want to do anything to escalate the tensions. And what Dino talked about consistently is de-escalation. That's something we trained our officers. So anything that may antagonize the protesters, I think it's a very good suggestion that you move everybody, including your product, your employees, out of sight, out of mind. So it just looks like a vacant, empty storefront. You'll have less I think, of an incentive for those looters to break into your building. You want to be sort of as innocuous and invisible as possible to them.
Thank you. Agreed, Jim, 100%. Wow. Okay, let's give away some Amazon money. Vinny?
Let's do it. So we have 3 winners left. We'll get through these quick. And let's see who, 3 more $25 gift cards to get away. And let's see. Oh, Steve.
Oh, Steve DePascal. All right. I know Steve can use it for the holidays. So awesome. Let's get right to the next one.
Well, my name wasn't referred, but I did refer some individuals.
He can't win.
Nah,
that's cheating.
Ray. Nice.
All right.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Ray. And one more.
That's great.
And Don.
Fantastic.
Congratulations
to all of our winners. And I just want to, close us out today with just some heartfelt feelings to seeing the panelists again in this environment after all these months and to see you're all doing well is amazing. Jim, I can't thank you enough. I've spending the time, we know people, Jim and I, we know the same folks and, probably cut from the same loins. And, it's been great to get to know him over the next couple of days, the past days. And the information he shared with us today is invaluable. And I hope everybody takes that information, runs with it, does something more than we did yesterday with that information. Again, we're here to help. There's a checklist that you'll be able to get. And in a minute, you'll hear the voice of voices tell you how to get that. But I just want to personally thank everybody for their contribution to this event today. I know we threw it together rather quickly. There were a lot of schedules to juggle. There's a lot of busy people on this call, and we try to accommodate everyone's schedule. So I know a Friday, a cold Friday, if you're in New Jersey, the 150th day of rain, I think, here and going. But to get this kind of talent together for you is not easy. So I really appreciate everyone again for whenever we call on you. Geez, you're always there for us. So we really, really are grateful to you. So Nick, what do you want to talk about? How do they download our checklist? How do they get, here it is. We got to hear your voice again, Nick. I can't.
Yeah. Oh, okay, Dino. Yeah, we did put together a checklist. It's a long one. I think it's Vinny, about 15 pages. So a lot of information, all the information from this presentation, plus some other information that we've gathered from various sources. And you can get that from our website, plancompanies.com/civil unrest checklist. Okay.
Thank you everyone for spending part of your Friday with us. Be safe for Halloween. It's Halloween Eve, right? So in law enforcement, a nightmare night. But for the rest of you, hopefully a fun night, a safe, fun night. I got approval from Jim to do this, and we always end it with a Sinatra. You guys know, you all know what's coming, and it's about to hit you again. Nick, can we tee up our Sinatra closing? And again, thank you to everyone who joined us today. Plenty of follow-up to come. Jim, sir, thanks again for your service and for everything you did with us today. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.